Hi, it's Tim Cole, and I want to talk to you about relationship and how important relationships are, and a little bit about the season that we find ourselves in. Relationships are the foundation, the core of life. It's the essence of living, is finding ourselves in relationship. You know, it's fascinating to me. I love studying Genesis. Genesis is one of my favorite books. It's the book of beginnings. There's something in a biblical interpretation known as the law of first reference. And there's so many of those laws, if you will, those principles that are set, revelational principles about how God set things up and he intended things to be. They're revealed in the book of first, the book of Genesis. And I often go back to Genesis 1 and 2, and I revel in the majesty of God and the wisdom of God and how he created our planet. In 7 days he worked. And you know, each day it says he declared that it was good. And on the sixth day, he said it was very good because he made man out of himself. He picked up dust. He blew his own breath into man, and man became a living being. And he blessed man and put him in the garden. And he said, be fruitful, multiply. So he gave him identity. He gave him blessing, and then he gave him assignment. Phenomenal plan that God laid out in Genesis. But that's not what I want to focus on. Everything was good until that sixth day when God said it's very good, and then God rested. It's interesting that we find out in the next chapter that for the first time in God's creation, there's something that wasn't good. And that was that Adam was alone. Now, was Adam really alone? God was with him. And we use this excuse, and the enemy uses this excuse, even in our modern culture, where we're every man for himself. There's so much in our culture that's distracting. Everything feels like it's the centrifugal force of life is pulling us away from community instead of into community, away from significant relationship and into instead of into a significant relationship. And it gives us an excuse when things get tough, when there's challenges in relationship, to just discard them and say, well, it's okay, we don't really need that, so we just move on. But the first thing that we find in creation that was not good was the loneliness, or the sheer individuality. If I can say it that way, the individuality, apart from the collective identity, the individuality of Adam. Now, he had God. As I said it, we can use that excuse. It's just me and God. I mean, he loves me. I know who I am in Christ, so I don't really need anybody. That is, if you know God at all, you know that's the furthest thing from the truth. That's an excuse. That's a half-truth that will lead you to loneliness and destruction. But I want to challenge you that there is this thing in God's heart that he knew, and he set inside of us this necessity of living, and finding that sense of well-being comes from living in community, in relationship. And it's when we find ourselves in real relationship that we find the meaning of our lives, that we find the safety of living it out in the adventure that was intended to be, always pushing the boundaries without living in this danger zone where we're just a law unto ourselves. No, we have the mind of Christ together. It's together. It's a plural thing. We have the mind of Christ. I want to encourage you in this season where it feels like the enemy is doing everything he can to, like that centrifugal force of a flywheel, pull everything apart. And in some ways it feels freeing because we're feeling the power of the release of that circular motion. And in some ways it feels like it's regenerative, and there's a power there, and we can express ourselves in ways that we've really always longed to, that we couldn't do when we were confined in the community, maybe of a church or a Bible study or a small group or a friendship. But the enemy is really underfoot right now. There's a strategy. It really comes from a spirit of Jezebel. Don't brisk, or don't pull back because I'm using some biblical hyperbole. I promise you, I don't mean it in some weird way. I just mean that Jezebel came the day after the greatest defeat of the enemy and the victory for the Lord in Israel, when all of Israel turned to God. The day after, the spirit of Jezebel came to him and breathed that hot demonic air into his space, and he caused him to have the wrong version of the story 24 hours later, where he says, I'm the only one left. God, it's what was me. You might as well kill me. And you know the story. He goes by the brook, and angels had to feed him, and ravens came and fed him, and God took him up to the mountain and hit him in a rock and passed by him, and it was in this still small voice. And basically God said to him, what are you doing here? I've got 7,000 others who haven't bowed. Oh, but I'm the only one. I've got 7,000, but I'm the only one. I've got 7,000, I'm the only one, Elijah felt. And I want to challenge you, that's exactly the scenario we're in the season that we're living in on planet Earth. The enemy is trying through this spirit of Jezebel to give us a complex, a feeling, a sense that it's hopeless. We're all by ourselves. And leaders, if you're a leader, let me talk directly to you. Don't fall for it. Identify the spirits that are out whispering in your ear and cut off their voice. Tune your ear to the voice of God. Like Elijah in that cave, hear the still small voice again and let it revive your soul. Hear that there are people around you that love you. Now, let me get to the point. Let me challenge you. I found in this season, it's work to maintain relationship. It's work to maintain a marriage. It's work to maintain close relationships like David and Jonathan. It's work to just maintain relationships all around you. But the work is so worth it. And dear ones, even if we don't necessarily see immediate results for ourselves that we would qualify it as worth it, it's worth it to him. He's worthy of us having cultivated and committed ourselves to real relationships. I've had the occasion in these last few months to have people who have separated from me and from others around me, from local church. And, there's this risk that we fall into the trap that relationships are only as good as they benefit me. And I want to challenge you to cast that off and to shake that off. That comes from the pit of hell. Jesus was sent into the world by Father, knowing that most of the world would fully reject him. There was no benefit to God. None. The benefit was so small. The joy set before him, Jesus endured the cross. That joy represented such a small percentage of all of humanity, and yet God was still willing to give it. It says that Jesus knew from the beginning who would betray him, and yet he still embraced him as part of his posse, his crew, his tribe. I just want to challenge you that it's work to have real relationship, and it's work to maintain them, not only the ones that are close to us, but can I just say to you, it's actually even more significant and valuable to God, how we treat those relationships that really will have no potential benefit to us. Relationships and people are worth fighting for. It doesn't matter whether there's even a parting of ways. Fight for the relationship. Submit your heart before the Lord and allow him to do the work so that your heart remains clean, even when those around you or those want to separate and they say things bad about you, or give them the benefit of the doubt, not because of their sake. Do it because you're keeping your heart pure before the Lord, because you would never want to do anything to taint your ability or capacity to value relationship, because that's what God values. I believe he seeded the very best things in life only into relationship. And it's only when we roll up our sleeves and pull out our shovels and are willing to mine the gold out of those relationships that we inherit the best things in life. Dear ones, let me challenge you and encourage you. God set you on this planet not to be alone. Fight with everything in you against the sense of hopelessness, a sense of despair that you're all alone. Like Elijah, you'll have a God moment coming for you in the cleft of the rock, where he tenderly pulls you aside and speaks to you and whispers in your ear, Elijah, I love you, but you're not the only one. You are not alone. I've got others. So fight for the others around you and fight to get to them and maintain those relationships and keep your heart pure before the Lord and clean toward everyone around you, and value relationship like God values it.